is now ready.
Alright.
Provide humility, sir. I'm going to stand up tonight and watch my knees knock. I always get pretty nervous doing these things, but it's something I can do to help. My name is Murray. I'm an alcoholic.
I'm Murray.
I'm Ray.
I'm sober today by the grace of God that I found contact with through the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a design for living that really works. I found in this book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I found out about the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, from you people in this room when I came in. I came here all ready to tell my story the way I see it, and then Bill's here and Brian's here, and they were here when I got here, so now I got to tell the truth. I need to loosen up a little bit, so let me tell you a couple stories that really aren't connected to anything. It's like, for instance, there's an alcoholic walking along the beach in a drunken stupor, and he comes along and he finds a lamp in the sand, and he rubs it, and out pops a genie. He says, you let me out of the lamp, I'll give you 3 wishes. This alcoholic says, well, just give me a bottle that can never be emptied. And he says, okay. And there's a bottle, and he drinks it, and fills up, and drinks it, fills up, and he's starting to get hammered, and he's like, whoa, hold on there, fella, what else? You got 2 more wishes. He says, give me 2 more of these. The guy's alcoholic and an addict. They're driving along. Alcoholic and his wife, an Al-Anon, they're driving along, and the cops get him, eh? And the alcoholic pulls over, and the cop says, I got you doing 120 kilometers in the 80 zone. He says, no, you're an officer, that can't be true. He says, I set my cruise control on 80, and his wife leans over, and she says, that's not true. You always hit at 120. You say the cops never give you a ticket. He looks at his wife and says, you just shut up. I'll deal with you when we get home. And the cop steps back and says, also, I noticed, sir, he says, I see you don't have your seatbelt on. He says, oh, I knew you were going to want to see my license and registration, so I took off my seatbelt so I could get at it. And his wife says, that's not true. You never wear your seatbelt. He says, seatbelt. He says, would you just stop it? I'm trying to get out of I'm trying to talk to the officer here. And the officer leans in the window and he says to the lady, does he always talk to you like that? And she says, only when he's been drinking. So I like that sound. That sound of laughter to me is that's the spiritual soundtrack to this program. We've all cried enough tears. We've all had enough. By the time we get here, our membership dues are paid in full. We've paid our price, and there's been enough crying. So we can have some laughter along the way. That's important to me. And I'm here tonight to tell you what it's like, what happened, and what it's like now. And before I can do that, I qualified as an alcoholic, and then we have to understand what do I mean by an alcoholic. The way I see it, the way the book tells me, and the doctor's opinion is that alcoholism is a 2-part illness. It's a mental obsession and it's an allergy to the body. Has anybody here got allergies besides alcohol? Anybody got like a food allergy? What are you allergic to?
I'm allergic to potassium, basically.
What happens when you take potassium?
Hurts my stomach.
Hurts your stomach? Yeah. So there's an allergic reaction to potassium that makes your stomach hurt. See, I have an allergic reaction to alcohol. My reaction is I want more. Right? When I start to drink, I want more. And there's no telling where that's going to end. I'm also allergic to cats, you see. And when I get around cats, my reaction is itchy, watery eyes. And if I stay away from cats, I don't really have that reaction. And it's the same with alcohol. My reaction to alcohol is I want more. If I never have a drink, I never have that reaction. However, you never see me drive into the pet store at 5 to 6 at 180 kilometers an hour to get there before it closes, to spend money on my visa that I don't have so that I can get a cat and rub it on my face so that I can get that reaction, right? So there's something else that goes on that makes me get drunk. There's something else. And the other thing is this mental obsession. There's something wrong with my mind. I'm not like other people. I call that the snake. I have a little snake in my mind. There's this little thing that says, it's okay, Murray, this time it'll be different. This time you'll be okay. You'll just have a couple, it'll be fine. If I was a normal person, that'd be true. I'd have 1 or 2 and then I'd get, go home and sleep it off and get up in the morning and be fine. But when I have 1 or 2, my body says get more, and then I get more, and then I want more. So that means by 2 in the morning, I'm sicker than I was when I started, and I'm thirstier than I was when I started, and I want more than when I started. So you can see how awkward it might be to try and stop. My first drink, if I was allergic to alcohol and never drank alcohol, I maybe never would know. I had a problem. My first drink happened when I don't remember it so much as I've been told about it. I was about 2 years old, and back in those days, everybody drank a lot. And one fellow there was a party going on, a get together, and the fellow was pouring shots on the counter, whiskey, and he turned and said, "What do you want in your drinking?" Little Murray scooted up on a chair and grabbed the first shot, downed it, and was reaching for the next one, right? Why that happened, I don't know, probably just imitating adults, but the fact is I was exposed to alcohol and then the allergies started. That was my first exposure. Back in those days, most of you people are of that kind of age. We didn't have the internet, we already had a couple of TV stations, you know, if it wasn't the hockey game on or Lawrence Welk or something, there really wasn't much to do. And I can remember a lot of quietness in my house growing up. Grew up in Port Sidney or here, and it was pretty quiet when Dad wasn't drinking, and if he was drinking, it was pretty quiet because he was passed out. And but when people would show up, that was an excuse to drink together, right? And the bottle would come out and the beer would come out, and people would kind of perk up and start smiling, stories get told, and maybe guitar would come out and they'd start singing and laughing and carrying on. It was a good time. So early on, I had the exposure to the alcohol, and I had the mental idea that alcohol meant fun. So if I was going to get it, there's some debate, is it genetic or is it social? It really doesn't matter. I had both. I was fucked before I even got going, right? And I spent the rest of my early years trying to get a drink when I could. And it was always around, so if Dad said, "Go get me a beer," I'd get him one. The price of admission was a little shot, a little drink. Not very much, but just a little exposure. So by the time I was old enough to figure out how much I wanted and when I wanted it, I think I was pretty well on the way. And I can remember a time when I was 18 years old. I had a grown-up job paying a real wage. Like, I had left a job in the city for I think it was $4.20 an hour, and I started working for the government at $8.05 an hour, and it was a pretty good deal. I was making real money, and I cashed my check. I can just remember that like a picture on the wall of me sitting in my apartment I paid the rent for. I had a full case of beer in the fridge. I had a bottle of whiskey on the counter, bag of dope or some hash or something on the table. I had the Who going full volume. Man, life was good. And Bill says in his story, I had arrived. That's the way I wanted life to be. That's how I saw it, and I worked pretty hard for years to keep it that way. Thing is, I met this good woman and married her, and she started to notice that the money went in a certain way most of the time, right? And it was then the first time I noticed pressure on it, and without belaboring the point, I dragged that poor woman through 11 years of hell, spent every penny I could on this increasingly. Anybody here maybe understands, once you start to drink, you need more to get where you want to be, so it starts to spiral, starts to carry on, and I always worked hard because the last thing you want to do is piss off your dealer and run out of money for beer, right? So I worked hard to be who I was and where I ended up. And where I ended up was drunk, broke, stoned. My wife had left me and I was in London in a guy's basement. I got her, I convinced her to move to London with me because I was going to stop drinking. I had been stopped for 2 years. That's something that's important to know, is this disease progresses whether I drink or don't drink, and I'm going to get sicker whether I drink or I don't drink. And I thought that taking alcohol in my body was my problem, so I decided to stop drinking, and that's what I did for 2 years, 3 months, 3 days, or something like that. And if you'd asked me at that time, "What are you doing?" I would have said, "Well, I'm not drinking." And what are you going to do tomorrow? I'll be not drinking. That was an activity that I did, not drinking. That was this thing that I did. And I made sure you knew good and well how hard it was for me to live my life by not drinking. It was hell, My mind's going around 90 miles an hour. No way to control it, because, alcohol's not my problem. Alcohol is the answer. I'll tell you something. If alcohol hadn't have stopped working, I never would have come here, and I never would have quit drinking. But it got to be that I couldn't live sober, and I couldn't live drinking. So I knew I was dead. And that time in London, I was telling you about, my wife left me. Couldn't drink, could not drink. I can remember leaving from up here, going down there. I was living down there and coming up every other week and staying with her. And that drive down was so empty, so lonely. I had that metal ball, that cold steel ball in your stomach you feel when you know things just aren't right. I knew there was no money for drugs, there was no money for alcohol. There wasn't anything good going to happen in my life for the next 2 weeks, and it got worse as I got closer and closer to London until I got there. And I sat in the parking lot of the house I was renting at, and I had a panic attack. I just couldn't breathe. It was a weight on my chest, and I just knew this is it. I mean, it was like some kind of Stephen King horror movie. There was nowhere to go. I didn't know what to do next. And it was just, we've all been there. If you haven't been there, you wouldn't be in this room. You know, if you didn't know this was the end of the line. And I wanted to die. And I started looking for ways out. I started looking in at work. I used to make soap, and I had these big tanks that were 2 stories high and 8 feet across. And I started looking in that tank and watching it going around and around. But if I just dropped in there, it'd be over pretty quick. I wanted to die. I was finished. I didn't know anything else to do. I was just being honest. I don't know what else to do. And the only thing that really kept me from doing that was my brother was a supervisor on the shift, and I didn't want him to have to drain the tank and let that out, right? So, you know, things get really bad just before they get better, and it was really as bad as it got. And I was laying on my bed in that place, that house where I was renting, and when there was nowhere else left to go, nothing else to turn and do, they say there's no atheists in a foxhole, right? So I started to pray. I didn't know what else to do. I just instinctively, I had no idea what else to do. I remember laying, I can even tell you, I was laying on my right side and I started trying to say the words of the Lord's Prayer because I just knew that I had to pray. I don't know why. And I couldn't remember the words, and that's when it kind of dawned on me. And I was pretty far away from this thing, this God thing. And why I thought this God thing could help me, I have no idea. But I got up from there, determined to try and do something. And today I look back and I think the higher power kind of said, okay, maybe he's had enough, right? There's a lot of other stuff that went on here, but I'm not here to tell you. It took me 50 years to get this far in my life. I don't want to spend that time getting you there, how it was like, what it was like, what it was like, what it was like, what it was like. What happened is, I knew I had to change something. So I went to the company doctor, and this new honesty came over me, and I said, Doc, this is what I think is wrong with me. And I told him about my drinking. He said, yeah, you're an alcoholic, according to my information. And he said, you can do one of 3 things. He says, you can go to AA. I said, oh, no, I don't want none of that AA stuff. Didn't know why, but I didn't want any part of it. And he said, you can go to a treatment center. Well, that sounded a lot like AA. I didn't want any part of that either. He says, or you can go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist or whatever they call those guys. So I said, that sounded pretty good, right? So I went to this guy, and he ran me through his tests. Have you done this? And how much do you drink? No. He said, yeah, you're an alcoholic. But nobody told me what an alcoholic was, right? I just knew that this thing about drinking was not working, and there was something wrong with me. So he met with me every couple of weeks, and every once in a while in that session, every time he mentioned about going to AA. But he was breaking me down, right? He put the idea in my head, and we put seeds out there, don't we? We put seeds in people's mind, and that seed was in my mind, and finally it seemed like a good idea to look up AA. So this is in London. I called the hotline. I got one of these little things here, what you do, and I called the number and talked to the lady. Up here we had Rose, right? Well, this was their version of Rose, and she said, I said, I want to go to a meeting, and she said, well, there's one tonight at 8 o'clock right by where you live. I'm thinking, tonight? Well, I don't want to. She called my shit, right? She called my bluff. She said, I want you to go tonight. And I said, well, I don't know if I can go tonight. I was home from work because I said I had to deal with a medical issue, right? I was off because of this. She said, well, tomorrow night it's here at this spot. And I said, well, what about on Friday? She said, never mind. You got enough information. You want to go tonight or tomorrow, you can go. If not, call me Friday. So you hung up. Bitch hung up on me. I thought she was going to listen to my problems. I thought she was going to have some sympathy, right? The last thing we need, sometimes. So I called her back. I'm kind of getting screwed up. What happened? I ended up calling her back that day or another day, next day, something like that. And she told me where the meeting was. And I said, okay. I knew where the address was. So I was kind of new to London. So I drove out there about 7 o'clock, and I drove through the neighborhood up the street, saw the church, went up and around the block, and about 7:15 I drove through the parking lot, figured out where it was, and then about 7:30 I parked and went into the building, and there's nobody around at 7:30 in the day. I mean, you know as well as I do, right? There's nobody around. Nobody shows up till 5 to 8. So I went down in the basement, found the karate club over here. There was another room with the AA thing's not very well run. I don't know if I'm going to go to this, So I sat in my car, and I thought, well, if nobody comes, I'm going to go. And about 5:02, it was a men's meeting. This is a city meeting, so about cars started coming from every direction, parking. They kind of sort of blocked me in, right? You're waving at me hi. You know how we wave at strangers, right? It's like, so I got out of my car, kind of the group thing, right? This power is real. And I got up and I went and they started shaking my hand. And I sat next to an old guy, and he says, you're new? I said, yeah. I didn't know how he knew I was new, right? Shaking and baking and white, and sweaty, and so they called first step, third tradition, like we do for newcomers quite often. Went around the room. It was a men's meeting, and that was good too, because no offense, ladies, but I'd never seen a woman drink like some of y'all drink to get here, I guess. I could identify, the process started of identifying with people, and went around, and there's guys who've been coming for 30 years, and they had big beards, and I remember sleeping on the beach in Mexico, and I didn't really identify, but I went all the way around, and right near the end, there was a guy, and he's sitting there like this, he says, well, my name's so-and-so, so things are pretty good. He says, I got my ear chipped last week, and I got my license back, and my wife's letting me see the kids, and I got an apartment to live in, and I got a new job, and I think, this is a guy like me, right? I wanted to be that guy, and I identified with somebody, and I was kind of, something happened, right? AA had me then, AA had me, you people had me, and after the meeting, they, shook my hand some more, and they wrote their names and the phone numbers down, and we do that, like I always tell newcomers, I said, give your phone number to somebody. This 12-step work doesn't have to happen after step 11. It can happen tonight. You see somebody new, give them your phone number. You've got a coffee pot to clean up, you can clean up the coffee pot, you can help clear away chairs. And you know what? When I'm doing something to help someone else, I feel better, and it helps me. And those guys gave me their phone number, and it's kind of like a lottery ticket, You give out phone numbers all the time, but nobody ever calls you, right? Like, it's just, you do it because you feel better, and if they call you, that's an added bonus. And if you ever feel like you're bothering an AA person by calling them at night with the phone number, don't, because it helps. It helps me. When one of you people call me, I feel so good. And one guy gave me his number, and I phoned him at midnight just to see if he'd answer the phone, right? And he did. And he said, how did you like that meeting? I said, it was pretty good. He said, well, we'll go to another one tomorrow. How's that? It was kind of weird. I thought it was like an inoculation or something. I'd been to a meeting. I thought that was it. I was going to not drink anymore. I thought that's how I don't know why I thought that, but that's how it seemed. And it was the strangest conversation. I said, yeah, I felt so good. I almost felt like celebrating by drinking. He says, well, we'll go to a meeting. And then I said something else about, I didn't want to get too sad, or I might start drinking. He says, well, then we'll go to a meeting. Everything ended up with go to a meeting. So next night I met him at a meeting, and then I was off, right? I started going to meetings there. I started coming to meetings here. When I was coming home at night, all of a sudden I had a new reason for living, right? And getting there, doing that step to get into these rooms was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life at that time. It took more balls, and everybody else knows that because you're all sitting here. You know how bad you have to feel to get here in the first place. And I kept coming, and I got a group, and I got a sponsor, before I got a sponsor, and I kept waiting for this magic fairy dust to be sprinkled over me, so I'd feel like not drinking, but I didn't. I was still kind of just putting the time in until I could get better enough to go back to drinking. There's a joke Robin Williams tells us, says if he said they got a new pill in Sweden they've invented that'll cure alcoholism. And being an alcoholic, he said the first thing I thought of is what happens if I grind up 3 of them and snort it. That's my mind. That's how I think, right? I'm thinking of ways to get through this so that I can get to the other side so I can party comfortably. So I kept going to meetings, and it's just lucky for me. Now I don't think it's luck. Now I think it was the way my power guided me. But I went to a Saturday morning meeting in London. It was a Joe and Charlie meeting. And these guys study the big book, right? And they break it down. They told me about, in the meeting, that particular one was talking about the doctor's opinion and what's wrong with us. What's an alcoholic? They discuss what's an alcoholic. Obsession of the mind, allergy of the body. You're so fucked that the only thing that can make you better is a power greater than yourself. If all I need to do is work out more, get laid more often, and eat better, and I can stop drinking, that's not an alcoholic of our type. That's a type 2, that's a heavy drinker. The type of alcoholic like us can only get better, can only recover from alcoholism by a spiritual experience. That's what this book gives us, a spiritual experience. And we give this book to people and we sit in front and say, here, read this. You take a guy that can barely tie his shoelaces and you give him this book and tell him to read it. Good luck with that. Good luck with it. I never read this book. Because this book isn't a Stephen King novel. This is a textbook. And this book's become my best friend. This book is the most important thing in the world to me, next to my higher power. And it's a pretty thick book, and it's a textbook. And I don't know if anybody, did you ever have a grade 5 textbook for math? Did you ever sit down after school on a Saturday afternoon and start reading your math textbook? I never did. This is a textbook. It's meant to be studied, and it's meant to be gone through with a teacher, in my opinion. And that's what I'd like to just show you some math here. This is a pretty thick book, but it's important to remember. I'd like to just show you. This is a big long book, but what we need to remember is the program recovers in the first 164 pages of the book, right? It's not so big anymore. And the first 44 pages, we talk about step 1 and what's wrong with us. So program of action, what we have to do is right here. It's really not that much. But it's also very precise, it's very straightforward, and a lot of people I've met have run it into so much detail and so complicated that they get drunk, that you get really sick, you get confused. I was lucky enough to have a guy come along when I'd been 4 years coming to these rooms, and not sure if I wanted to stay or not, feeling better, not drinking, definitely having some kind of higher power. I'd done it step 1, 2, 3. Steps 1, we do hours of alcohol. Hell yeah, I had to go to AA. Step 2 is a power greater than me. The book tells me half the people come in here atheists, thinking there's no God, and the other half come in here, therefore, thinking there's a God. And I was one of those people. I knew there was a power greater than myself. I've worked in the bush, I've worked all over outside, and I've seen some powers. There's a lot of things bigger than me, I can tell you that. Step 3 was a decision. Well, my decision was made when I said I want to get better. There's a prayer in there to be read. And I sat around here on step 1, 2, 3. My sponsor took me through a 4th. Back in those days, 4th was quite often treatment center 4th, which was the narrative for your whole life. I was born in a small little village in Africa, and this is what happened, and on February. And I did one of those, and it was excruciating, it was painful. And the directions I found in the book today are the things I hate, my fears, people I've harmed, and my sex issues, how I treat the other sex. And it's just a list of names and the causes of why I've been afraid of those things, why I've harmed those things, and it's really not anything terribly awful. So I met a guy that took me through these steps thoroughly, one-on-one, face-to-face, and when I say thoroughly, some people here can tell you that it's thorough. It's a little bit at a time. It took me 3 hours at a time, about 6 months, 5 months to get through it, and I finished, and when I got to the end, I knew I had done these steps. I knew I was recovered from alcoholism, and you used to hear people say, well, you can't recover from alcoholism. You can always drink. You're only 32 inches from your next drink. But you know what? I'm recovered from today because my higher power has got my back, and I've cleared the wreckage of the past, and I'm able to walk around the world knowing that God's got my back. And steps 1, 2, 3, we can do that over and over and over. Step 4 is a process of getting out the truth. It's taking inventory. It's nothing to be afraid of. If you don't know how, if you're afraid to, come and see me. I'll help you with that. Step 5 is a matter of going over it with God and another person. Step 6 is a matter of being sure that I was thorough with the steps. Is there anything I missed? It's a very short review. This doesn't have to take a long time. Bill Wilson was sober 2 months, something like that, 6 months when he worked with Dr. Bob. You know, Dr. Bob was sober a few days, and he went around, the two of them started. Where's that picture? It's right there, right? Bob's got 2 weeks there. He's not even finished shaking, and he's working with a third person. He wrote down step 7, saying I'm willing to get better, take away my defects of character. Step 8 is another list, comes from your 4th. These are the people I've screwed. These are the people I've harmed. Step 9 happens in God's time. I start to run into these people. They start showing up. If I'm willing to make amends, these people start showing up. It's happened to me in the coffee shop. Somebody will turn around, hey, how are you? And I'm like, oh, and can we talk? And so, we have a little conversation. And most of the time, those people have, said, I forgot you took that money. I forgot you did that, And most of those amends, I had to make financial amends. It cost me a bankruptcy. It cost me 7 years of no credit. I couldn't leave the country. I couldn't fly. I couldn't rent a room. Had to be done, right? Had to clear that. Step 10, that's the hardest part, step 1 through 9. Step 10 is the whole cycle again on a daily basis. Step 11 is something I'm doing every day. It's seeking to, through prayer and meditation, increase my conscious contact with higher power. So your higher power is your higher power, mine is mine. We spend any more time than that defining it, it's a waste. I don't want to talk about what your higher power is, and you don't need to know what mine is, because there's no way you and I have the same higher power. It's not possible. We're different people. We've had different experience in life. But I spend my time here and there, these days, finding out about my higher power, finding out how it works, how to get a little closer to that higher power, see if I can make it work in my life. Because the power I see isn't a white guy with a beard and a big cane with some kind of gates. It's this force of nature, much like microwaves. We didn't have microwaves 7 years ago. We couldn't heat our coffee in them. But guess what? Microwaves have always been there. They've always been floating around. It wasn't until we figured out the technology to use them and put them in a box we could heat up our coffee. Speaking of coffee, I believe this power is here to help me, and I believe this power doesn't care if I get better or not. This power doesn't care if I live or die, but this power will always help me if I ask for it, if I know what to ask for. If I say, God, let me win the lottery, maybe not, right? But if I say, God, let me help these people, let me help where I can, I never seem to miss out on a chance to help. I do the next thing that's in front of me. I try to stay where my hands are. I'm here today because I was asked. I'm never going to refuse to help if it's in my power. You know, you say, oh, you left this car off me, I might need some help, but you know, I'm going to do what I can. Step 12, like I said, the work, the way I see the work changes. On your first day, probably can't help anybody, but that's what we say, you're the newcomer, you're the most important guy in the room. So just showing up, you're helping somebody on your first day. On your second day, if another guy comes to the door and it's his first day, you can show him where the coffee pot is. You can help him sit down, you can hold his coffee pot for him if he's shaking too hard to drink it. You know? Days after that, you can start coming to meetings early and help them to set up. You can stay after the meetings late and start to clean up. Doesn't take very long before you feel like chairing. If you feel comfortable with it, do it. If you want to speak, if you're asked to speak, if you want to, do it. If you're going to drink over it, maybe not so much. But well, that work changes. In step 12, having done the steps, having recovered from alcoholism, for today, my job, the way I see it, is to help people learn what's in the book and take them through it. And if we do that, if I help you guys the way they help me, then that's how this program works. The reason I can see so far today is because I'm standing on the shoulder of giants. These guys here that kept these rooms open. And they learned from people who learned from Bill and Bob, right? Who learned from the Oxford group. So it just goes on and on and on, right? The power is here to help. So, I don't know, is that even very long? I can go on and tell you about 6 more stories. I can talk all night. I'm warmed up now. So, I don't want to dwell on what it was like. I wanted to give you a clear picture of what happened without going too much into, there's some pretty gory details I don't really want to talk about my medical condition, but I was pretty sick. And there's other things besides alcohol in my life. There's drugs, I think I might have mentioned in that. And there's other things that have happened. I stopped drinking, I started doing a little weed here and there, and then I got off on a tangent. It seemed like every time I wandered away from these rooms, I found something else to do. I never drank, but I started to smoke this or that. Then I stopped that, and I started to pop this or that pill. And I got off of that, I never drank, never smoked. It always got a little bit better, but there was always one more thing. And then I got off of the one more thing, and I started to eat. And I started to gain 300 pounds. Now, this is an AA meeting, stick with me. But the miracle of this thing is, when I was getting on my knees in the morning asking for help, I'm saying, God, I'm sober, thank you. I'm clean, thank you. But I'm fat, and the doctor says he's going to operate on my heart, and I got diabetes coming on fast. I don't want to die. I didn't want to get sober just to die from this. But I was being honest with my higher power. I'm saying, God, I like the way it is. I like eating at night. Screw you, I like the way it is. I don't want to change. However, if you can find a way to make me willing to change, that'd be good. And that was my prayer for 6 or 8 or 9 months, whatever it was. I said, God, please help me to be willing to change. And I've lost 80 pounds in the last 6 months, through doing these steps. I sat down with a guy. He did a 4th, 5th with me. I sat down. He did a 4th, 5th. I did one with him. He did it was like a circle jerk. It was like mutual, right? And you know what I'm saying? We got it done, right? But I had to be honest. I had to go right down in there and say, God, I don't want to die. How many holes does it take to sink my boat, right? I've come this far and I'm still dying. I don't want to die. So I did that, walked out of there. That was on a Wednesday or whatever day it was. And on Friday I signed up for this thing, followed my doctor's advice, started doing what I was asking. This higher power helped me in that. And I'm here today. And check with me in 6 months. Maybe I'll gain it all back. Who knows? But this thing's working, right? And I haven't ordered my Halo and Wings yet on Amazon.com or anything like that, because you hear the story about 12 cans of garbage and 11 lids, right? As soon as I look after this defect character and that defect character, some other shit starts stinking, right? And but the difference between belief in step 2 is believe a higher power greater than myself could restore me sanity, and the faith that talks about it in step 10 and 11, the difference is belief is something, when I ask you where's a good place to get my car fixed, and you say, well, Canadian Tire's got a good guy, they won't screw you too bad, go in there and they'll do a good job. And I can believe you, go in there, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I can go on your believing you and go in there, and they do a good job, and I pay the money, and it works. The next time I go back there, I don't have to believe it. I have faith, because it happened to me before. I had that experience. I have faith that it worked before. So all I'm trying to tell you is I have had belief about drugs, alcohol, food, and it worked. So my faith today is whatever shows up in my life, if I turn it over to the higher power, run this through the steps, this process, who am I to say it's not going to work? I was provided for every day up until today. I was provided for today. What makes me think it's not going to work tomorrow? What earthly reason would I have to think that? That's good enough. Thank you.